Welcome back, everyone. Today I wanted to do another literature review or research review. As a reminder, please like and subscribe or leave comments. It helps me out, and I like to see you guys ask questions and interact, give me your opinions. I like talking to you guys, so leave me a comment, hit a few buttons for me. Helps me out quite a bit. So today I wanted to talk about this paper that was published earlier this year. Let me pull this up here. It is called Scale Insects Hemiptera coccomorpha. Morphology is transformed under trophobiosis. So there's a lot there if you're not super familiar with these entomology groups or these insect groups or these insect terms. To start out, let me just point out that this is actually a pretty interesting paper. I did have a few concerns about it, but it really was a subject I didn't know that much about. I knew about, broadly about this subject. So scale insects are tiny little sap-sucking insects that you commonly find on soft tissue plants, or occasionally you'll find coccids on trees. Hemiptera are the true bugs. And the coccomorpha it literally means like the things which are coccid shaped. So morpha being shape. So these are scale shaped insects. It's a very, very large group. And they are specifically talking about mealybugs and their associated families. So for those of you who don't know what a mealybug is, let me show you. This is a mealybug. They are very small. It's usually just like less than a centimeter. Why are you on? They tend to be pretty small. There's some big ones, but they tend to be just a few millimeters at most, or a centimeter or two at most. This is the back side of it. So the head is up here. This is the tail in back here. So this is the tail. Let me make this a little bigger so you guys can see a little bit. So this back is the tail. This is the head up here. Its legs are on the underside. All of these filaments that you're seeing coming off of this is wax. And mealybugs and their other sister families secrete an enormous amount of wax generally, hence the name mealybugs. You can kind of see like little balls of wax all over the back here. So let me zoom in on this guy so you can see how textured this is. They secrete an enormous amount of wax for protection against predators and parasites, and also to limit the amount of water that is evaporated out of them. They're very, very small. They can't afford to lose a lot of water. Interesting things about the coccomorpha, the scale insects, is that the vast, vast majority of them are female. And they generally reproduce through parthenogenesis, which is like this clonal asexual reproduction, where a female will give, not usually lay eggs, but frequently give some version of live birth to daughters, which are basically her sister clones. And they will occasionally produce males in order to have sexual reproduction, but the males generally don't live very long. They just live for a few days, long enough basically to reproduce, and then they die. So many of the like coccomorpha and aphidomorpha, the aphid-like insects, the scale-like insects, undergo this parthenogenic reproduction in which females give live birth to clonally similar daughters. But generally, these are very, very hard insects to work with because they're very small and there's not a lot to see because they're covered in wax. So if you want to actually look at the morphological structure of these things, you have to strip all the wax off, generally clear out all the organs, and slide mount them, which we'll get to in just a minute. Let's go back to this title so we can talk about this a little more. And I will link this article. This is an ENTSOC, Entomological Society of America article. It's from the Annals of the Entomological Society of America. This was the January 2024 issue. And this particular article is open source, open access, so all of you have access to this. I will leave a link to their website, so if you want to read this article on your own. It's not super long. I think it's 15 pages, but the last several pages are just citations, so it's really only 10 to 12 pages of actual text, and a lot of that is pictures. So it's not a very difficult read. once you understand what we're talking about here. So those are the scale insects. Specifically, we're talking about the pseudococcids, the xenococcids, and the rhizoechids, which I'm not super familiar with that last family, and then the orthesids, which is another group of scale-like insects that secrete an enormous amount of wax. They're very small, and they undergo this parthenogenic reproduction. And specifically, they are talking about trophobiosis. So these particular insects that I just showed you, these scale insects, are symbiotes with ants. And ants keep them like humans keep cattle or pigs. And there's this ant agriculture that goes on, which you may not have known about. The most famous of this is probably leafcutter ants. They take the leaves that they cut. They don't eat those leaves. They feed it to a fungus that they culture within their nest, and then they eat the fungus. So they are growing fungus. But many other ants have a trophobiotic relationship with small aphids or scale insects, in which they can move them around like herding cattle, and the insects secrete a sugar water called honeydew that the ants feed on. And this relationship is called trophobiosis. It is literally a symbiotic relationship, biosis, in which one feeds the other, tropho. So this is food. This is feeding. In this case, the scales, the pseudococcids and the other scales feed the ants sugar water, and so the ants get this constant source of food, and the scales get protection from the ants because the ants will swarm and kill any predators that try to approach. So this is what this paper is looking at: is what is the relationship between these ants and these scales, and how has it possibly altered the morphology, the body structure of the scale insects themselves? What is the difference between a trophobiotic scale, one that is kept like cattle, and its wild counterparts? So what has the effect basically been of the ants' domestication of the scale insects on their actual body structure? And so it's a really cool idea to actually be able to quantify the differences that we see between the wild species and the domesticated species that these ants maintain. So the paper itself is really cool. Like I said, the scales have a lot of strange morphology that these people think has been altered by association with the ants. So what I wanted to show you was this. So this is a drawing, and this is how scale insects are usually portrayed in morphological texts or dichotomous keys or species descriptions, because you can't see a lot of the scale with all this wax. This is what the scale would look like in a drawing if you stripped away all the wax and removed all the organs and mounted it under a compound microscope. So this is from a different paper. I have this here just to show you the morphology of the scale insects. This is a pseudococcid, and this is from a paper called 3 New Species of Mealybugs by Pacheco et al. From 2016. So the head is up here. This dividing line down the middle is to signify that this side is the dorsum, so this is the back, and this other side is the venter. So the left side is the dorsum, the right side is the venter. So this is the back, this is the stomach. So you have the eyes here, you have these longer antennae, you have fairly, they're usable legs. Many species of pseudococcids have very, very small legs, and some species have very, very large legs. These are dorsal or anterior osteoles, which will be important for the paper, and back here are the posterior osteoles. And basically these are slits in the body that can secrete blood. It's kind of weird, but it's a defense mechanism. So many insects have a defense mechanism called reflexive bleeding, where if they are threatened by a predator, they will kind of spill out drops of blood that contain caustic or extremely bitter sorts of toxins in order to drive off the predators. And so they have those on the front and the back. They have a relatively, the wild types have like a moderate leg structure. All of these little kind of speckly peppered designs that you see around here, these are pores. These are all of the pores on the insect that secrete wax. And they secrete various other compounds and various forms of wax, but these are all the pores that secrete the protective wax. And these little dashed lines are the hairs. So they have in the wild type, they have very, very short hairs, or setae, and they have lots and lots of wax-producing pores all over the body. They have these large osteoles for protection. And then in the back, they have these very small anal lobes. These little these protruding spikes are called cerari, and I'm not entirely sure what they're used for. They're on most pseudococcids and other families of mealybug. I'm not entirely sure. Other than that they have enormous concentrations of wax-producing glands. I'm not entirely sure what they're used for, honestly. And then they have this anal ring, which can secrete this honeydew. Basically, it's plant sap that gets concentrated and spewed out the back of them. The reason that a lot of hemipterans produce honeydew is because they tap into the phloem of plants, which is the sap-producing tissues of the plants, and there's an enormous amount of hydraulic pressure or tension that's being forced through their mouths into their digestive systems. So Hemiptera have specialized digestive systems which can shunt sap directly out of their digestive system. So basically they don't explode from the pressure, and two, so that they can concentrate the things like the proteins and the fats that are in the sap. They don't need all the sugar, they need like the protein. So they shunt all of the sugar out of their body, out of their anus, and they produce these big globs of sugary water that we call honeydew. So this is the general shape of what a mealybug type of insect would look like. These are the respiratory pores, the spiracles. They usually have one in the front and one in the back. I can't really see the one in the back here. But you get the basic body shape of what one of these insects looks like up close. So now we can go back to the paper. So these researchers wanted to look at the various body changes and body structures that these scale insects undergo with their obligate association with ants. And so they were looking at ants two different kinds of ants, Acropygia and Dolichoderus, two different genera that are not related, and then all of their known associate scale insects. And they took a bunch of different morphological measurements on body shape and leg length and number of pores, and do they have these osteoles, do they have these anal ridges and things like that. And it took measurements of everything and then compared the known ant, what would you say, the trophobionts, but they're basically the ant livestock, with species which are free living with no known association with ants that are usually of the same genus, and then ones that may or may not be associated with ants, and that we think they could be, but there hasn't been good proof that they've been associated with ants, to see if there's a pattern in body shape. So this is what the ant associates look like. This is Eumyrmococcus. When you see Myrmo in a word, it usually refers to ants. So this is what the modified mealybugs look like, in that they're different from their other cousins, and that they have this very, very long tapered body shape. This is called a pyriform body shape. It means pear-shaped. And generally, mealybugs, like I showed you earlier, are generally kind of oval-shaped or a little rotund, but this pear shape seems to be very common amongst the ant symbiotes. So they looked at Acropygia, which is associated with one type. This is associated with the xenococcids. And then they looked at the Dolichoderus, which is associated with the other types of mealybugs. So they're associated with pseudococcids and rhizoechids and the orthesids. So the difference between them is that the Acropygia the queen is the queen is the one that they think has the selective pressure. When a queen leaves her nest on her mating flight in order to this is a virgin queen that she has to go and mate with a male, and then she has to go establish her own colony. She takes one of the mealybugs with her in her mouth, and the mealybug is live. She's not eating it, she's taking it as like a pet, and she then grows it and forms a herd of them. Like I said in the introduction, these guys are capable of this clonal reproduction, this parthenogenesis. So she takes a female mealybug with her, and then it just starts laying or giving birth to her own clonal daughter. So she just has to take one with her. But the selective pressure is that the queen has to get her there alive. Whereas with the Dolichodaris, they don't do this sort of queen flight. They do a colony fission. So instead, the colony will split apart, kind of like a bee colony, and they take half of the livestock with them, or part of the livestock with them, and the livestock all cling to each other and they get carried away. So they did a bunch of analysis. I did have some issues with their statistical analysis with what they were looking at, because they did a lot of principal component analysis, which I'm not going to go into how it works, but there has been, in the last several years, there's been serious doubts being raised about the validity of principal component analysis in multiple fields, not just in entomology or in biology, but across multiple fields of science. There seems to be a lot of, it seems to inadvertently create bias, and it creates a lot of faulty artifacts in the analysis. So I'm a little concerned with how much they relied on principal component analysis to do their statistical analysis. But they did other forms of statistical analysis, and it seems like things make sense. For instance, so they found that there was a clear separation between the Rhiziac and free-living scales and the ant-reliant scales on body shape, where you get more of this pear-shaped body form, or very, very circular, compact body form, makes them easy to move. They tended to be, associated scale insects tended to have smaller overall body size compared to the free-living ones, so they tend to be more compact, so they're easier to carry. They tend to have longer legs. The ones associated with Dolichodaris, which all kind of stick together and then get carried, tend to have longer legs, which would make them easier to carry. And then the osteoles tend to be reduced. The anterior osteoles, which are these things in the front and back, these are the anterior osteoles, the things which reflexively bleed as a defense mechanism, those tend to be reduced in the ones that are cared for by the ants, which makes sense because the ants are doing the defense of the insects. So there does seem to be a pattern that the ants are, in fact, domesticating these little scale insects, these little creatures, as their livestock, and it's causing genetic and morphological changes long-term on these insects. Kind of like how humans have genetically altered our chickens and our pigs and our cattle through selective breeding, the ants seem to be doing the same thing. So that's just really, really cool. Overall, it's a really interesting paper. This is out of Towson University, which is just right up the road from me here in Maryland. But it's really cool. I kind of wish they would have done a different statistical analysis just to be safe. People probably need to start moving away from principal component analysis because there's just too much bias. But it does seem to be kind of cool. If you didn't know about this sort of relationship between scale insects and ants, now you know. It kind of blows a lot of people's minds that other animals engage in agriculture similar to humans, especially animal husbandry. But there you go. And with that, I'll talk to you guys later.